This is your reminder that the BBC has yet to address the consistent transphobic leanings in its news coverage, and while the team behind Doctor Who is not connected to this in any way since this is a BBC-owned property, I'm going to keep pointing it out until the problem gets resolved. Links in a pinned comment below if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'll stop saying it when it stops being a problem. Well, you know what? If we're going to have a villain based around light, let's roll with it. Yeah, I think that works. Now, the slightly embarrassing thing about this is ahead of a video I already shot where I debuted the lights and was showing them off because I forgot that this video, which I'm shooting later, is going to be uploaded first. So you're going to have a later video where I'm going to make a thing out of having the lights, and it won't actually be the debut of them. Just roll with it when it happens, okay? Lux! Second episode of Season 2 of Doctor Who. The one with the animated villain. That was basically what the pitch was from the trailers for this season, and it certainly does deliver that. And I mostly like it. So, okay. It's very strange because granted, we're only 2 episodes in, but also, since it is only 8 episodes long, that is a quarter of the way into the season. But 2 episodes in, and this season is paralleling season 1 a lot more than I would care for. And this isn't just strictly because I had some issues with season 1, or at least parts of it. It's actually more just to do with, oh God, are we really falling into a template and a routine already? Because I noted with Space Babies when that came out, this is basically a standard Russell T Davies opener, just maybe one of his worst ones. And then last time it was, well, this is a very standard Russell T Davies opener. It's just one of his better ones. So the quality is varying, but in both cases, season kicked off with a very standard episode for RTD. And now we do a Pantheon villain with these sort of weird rules, different kind of approach, big swing kind of God-esque villain. Last time it was the Devil's Cord with Maestro. This time it's Lux with Lux, or I suppose I could also call him Mr. Ring-a-Ding. Although, quick peek behind the scenes, I am re-recording this video because my good mic kicked out on me, and it kicked out so early in the recording that I'm like, no, I just need to redo it. Plus, my thoughts were a little too scattered, but that meant that I lost what was a really nice moment where I mispronounced that name, and I'm going to pull that from the failed attempt to record this and present it to you here because it's too funny not to share. All right, you know what? We'll get to Mr. Dingaling. Well, hold up. No, not Dingaling. Ring-a-ding. Oh no. Oh no. Mr. D. Someone's going to do fan art of that if they haven't already. I can't be the first one who's accidentally said that. Still don't feel good about it. There you go. Have that as a treat. Blooper within thing. How meta. How appropriate for an episode like this. But yeah, this sort of, we're going to have an oddball, over-the-top villain who is connected to the toy maker, or at least the things like the toy maker. This was the same thing we had last episode too. Now, granted, the aesthetic is different. Last time it was music. This time it is, well, I was gonna say it's early film, except it also becomes television. So we're gonna pause this line of criticism, but I want to lay something out first. I'm not as excited by these Pantheon villains as I would like to be, and I think the fundamental issue for me overall is that it feels like trying to recapture the toy maker over and over and over again. And I know that they have kind of connected them to the toy maker. So maybe for some folks, that's enough of a rationale that they kind of operate on similar principles. I'll get into more of this a little bit later, but overall, it felt, well, it felt more unique for one thing, and it felt more justified for the specifics of what the toy maker's deal was, whereas it has felt a little bit more derivative each time since. And I'm not counting Sutek when talking about the Pantheon. Yes, they did kind of make him part of it because he was the god of death or whatever, but like he was also a returning villain who already existed separate from this entire notion. So I'm discounting him for the time being. Although I will not be shocked if the season finale brings us the Mara and makes that thing the god of something. But anyways, set all that aside for the moment. We're going to come back to Lux and the villain. I'll make some more comparisons at that point. I will say, broadly speaking, I do like this episode better than I liked The Devil's Cord. Now, The Devil's Cord was an episode that a lot of people seem to like, and I was lukewarm on. Although I was very quick to stress with that episode, my overriding thing was that I personally, and like this is a matter of taste and taste alone, did not super care for Jinx Monsoon as Maestro. Not because the performance that was given was bad, but because it wasn't something I particularly enjoyed. That level of campness, that level of bringing in stage drag style performance to the character, I didn't personally care for. I went into far more detail on this when I actually reviewed that episode, but that was my overriding issue with that. So I basically had one problem that was kind of persistent across the whole episode. This time, I have an overall episode that I actually quite like for the most part, but there's a lot of small things, and they kept happening. Like, I know I have nitpicks, and I note nitpicks, even during things that I like, but I try very hard not to have nitpicks wreck my enjoyment of a thing. But one of the ways that it can really be detrimental is if I have a lot of them. And they were fairly persistent across this for one reason or another. And some of it was missed opportunities. Some of it was just moments that fell a little bit flat. There were lots of little things while I do enjoy the bigger overall thing. So this is still kind of mixed for me. Although on balance, I probably do still like it more than The Devil's Cord, which I guess is a good thing. Cause on the one hand, I liked Robot Revolution more than I like Space Babies, and I like Lux more than I like The Devil's Cord. But on the other hand, like you're repeating the same template, even doing it better the second time, I kind of feel like I've seen it before. Weird comparison. This is kind of why I never really much liked the second Hunger Games movie. But whatever, I can't. Catching Fire. There it is. And almost everyone I know is like, oh, but that's the best one. And I'm like, I'm not saying it isn't better than the first one, but it's also repeating so much of what the first one did. Even though it's better, I'm still like, yeah, I've kind of seen this already. So I don't know if that's a comparison worth keeping in. Heck with it, I am. Okay, I'm going to start working my way through the actual episode as it went. I was thrown off a little at first because Belinda seemed oddly excited. Like, we're back in time? We're on Earth? 1952? Oh, I get to wear this dress? Don't get me wrong. The dress was great. It was a hell of a fit. And also, cute look for the Doctor. Bow ties are cool and all that. But at the same time, I was like, you were really good at putting your foot down and being like, take me home now. And now you're, like, all excited. It made a little bit more sense after the Doctor had set up what he called the Vindicator, the vortex indicator, and like got the data he needed. And when Belinda heard that get set off, she was like, oh, good, we can leave. And that's when it clicked. It was like, oh, this wasn't a change in attitude. This was you kind of accepting, okay, we can't get back yet. So during whatever time that we're here, I'll find enjoyment out of it. But as soon as we can go, I want to go. I would kind of like to have that to have been clearer earlier so I wasn't confused, but like it does kind of even out by the time they kind of have her reaction to that. So that did ultimately end up working out. I like the way that they handle the racism of 1950s in America, because it would have been really weird if they had these characters show up in 1950s Florida and not have at least touched on the racism aspect. And I think, like, just noting, it's just because it's real late at night and these people are nice, but like, we shouldn't even be in this diner. It's illegal for us to be in here. And I think noting it like that, but then moving on from it, was a real good way to handle it, because, again, 1950s Florida, you can't pretend that that's not a problem. But at the same time, since this episode isn't going to be about that, it's not worth having it take over any more of the story than it does. It makes the point and we move on, because we do need to acknowledge it, but it's not why we're here. So we did that. Now we're going to go forward. I liked the mother. I think her name was Lowenstein, Mrs. Lowenstein. And I liked the connection that she had with the doctor interacting with him. I really liked when, like, she noted the TARDIS and the doctor's like, does that give you hope? Like, that just felt nice. Like, bringing attention to the TARDIS as a symbol of hope without having to have him point at it and go, yes, it is a symbol of hope. Like, no, we made the point and made it very nicely, very sweetly. We've got actually them breaking into the cinema and encountering Mr. Ringading and also Mr. Pie, who I think I want to talk about first. Mr. Ringading, off to the side, do your little dance. I'll get back to you. So with Mr. Pie, here's what I liked about him. And this is a small thing that I'll try and explain quickly, but I liked that the whole thing with his wife, that is keeping him there and keeping him cooperative with Lux, with Mr. Ringading. I'll probably start calling him Lux. It's just easier, and I won't make that mistake that I made last time I recorded this. I like that the whole arrangement with his wife and that memory of her, that is something that he got into with Lux after Lux had already shown up and disappeared 15 people. Because I feel like in a lot of these stories, Lux would have already been working with Mr. Pie, and Mr. Pie, like, would have been this, oh, I know what I'm doing is wrong, but I love her so much and I can't let her go. And I'm not going to say stories can never make that work, but I see it a lot, and it stretches credulity for me, or at the very least, it makes it hard for me to find these people relatable for the amount of damage they are willing to cause, usually over an extended period of time. Generally, if you're going to have somebody like cause a whole lot of damage in an effort to save one person, or like in a case like this, the memory of one person, it works okay in a split-second decision, like an emotional moment, but like for them to have to keep re-upping and remaking that decision continuously and standing by it, that's where you kind of lose me. But that's not the case here, because the disappearing of these people, it already happened. So this is just why he's sticking around and why he's cooperating now. And heck, he's only half cooperating because he's trying to get the Doctor and Belinda out. So that was a little tweak on the formula that I tend to see, because like you can look at like series 10 episode Knock Knock to see it done in a way that doesn't really work for me, if you want a comparison for what I'm talking about. And the stuff with him and his wife was really sweet, especially towards the end. And I think they did a real good job at selling that. So he worked for me as a character. So let's talk about Lux. A whole lot about Lux I don't get. That's mostly a logistics thing, though. The overall like energy and feel of him, that I get. But like, why was he in Moonlight? Why did Moonlight reflecting off a spoon mixing with the light projected onto a screen? Why did that bring him out? Why? How has that never happened before? People will show movies outside. I've been to a friend's house where they set up a projector in their own backyard. So you're telling me there was never Moonlight and a movie projector prior to this? Because this doesn't have the excuse of the Devil's Chord, because I brought up when the Devil's Chord happened, like, you're telling me nobody played that chord prior to this, but people did point out it was set in 1925, the same year as the prologue bit for The Giggle, implying that it was the presence of the toy maker that like loosened everything up and allowed these Pantheon members to get free from whatever they were trapped in. That seems to be the other recurring thing, is they're trapped in something. And so that was how Maestro came out, with the chord. It was the first time somebody played that chord since the toy maker had been around. But this is 52. This is 27 years later. Really? So, I don't know. Logistically, I don't get why he's here. So, there's that. But, like, the logistics of how he got here doesn't really matter. Honestly, the logistics of how he's beaten don't fully matter either. But hold on to those. I'll come back to that as well. But there's the overall look, first of all. It's a really good recreation of the kind of rubber hose style of movement that you got, honestly, not too much by the 50s. You got a lot in the 1930s stuff. But then again, like, we do see Mr. Pie go and like pull a reel out of the back. So this could feasibly have been an older cartoon originally. So that's okay. There was another aspect of animation that isn't as okay, but I need to come back to that and talk about it as a whole section. So the visual look for Lux is good, and there's some neat little moments like how he's having trouble getting up the stairs. When before we saw him get all big and stuff, and he's like, I shouldn't have learned about perspective. That was kind of a neat little throwaway joke that honestly almost kind of reminded me a little bit of the Not Things from Wild Blue Yonder, where like they had to learn about object permanence because they didn't have enough experience in the world as we know it to understand that once something was no longer in their hand, it didn't stop existing. And like, so that one throwaway line about Lux having learned about perspective and now it was a pain in his rear end now that he knew how it worked. That was nice. I liked that. I also like that, like, when he starts solidifying and becoming real, basically becoming 3D fully modeled, it kind of goes in almost like a 90s independent comics kind of look, like The Mask, like the Mask comic book. It's creepy as hell, which I like. Like, there are some times where like that CGI just looks real creepy is a criticism. Like, no, here I love it. I love that he goes from like this very appealing, soft, rounded thing to just being darker without the core design actually changing. Like, it's a difference of what the effect is and then like lighting and color choices, but the fundamental design is still the same, but he looks so much creepier. I dug that. I actually liked that quite a bit. I thought that was a neat touch. Now, him getting defeated, there's one, again, this kind of will start to point to the sort of nitpick things that kind of piled up for me. But there was like one line that I didn't care for. But like the overall notion of him expanding out and taking in so much light that he just kind of became one with the universe, which didn't make him all powerful. It effectively dispersed him. He is everything and he is nothing. So I kind of like that as an idea. There was something almost kind of poetic about it. I like that it was kind of like a moth to the flame, that he wasn't like screaming. He wasn't like, no, but seemed almost entranced by it. And I kind of like that. I didn't like the doctor's line,
we're 60% water and we can still drown.
Just because like that is such a hackneyed line. That is such a standard go-to comparison line, especially in sci-fi where they like have the complicated technobabble solution to something, and then they have somebody make a basic analogy so that it makes sense to the audience. And I don't have a problem with doing that in general, but that specific comparison is real rote. It's real trite. It's been overused a lot. And also, this wasn't a case of technobabble that needed an explanation. Like I said, there was almost a certain poetry to what had happened to Lux, and then bringing it down to that analogy felt like it cheapened it a little bit, if I'm being completely honest. Lines like that are the kind of small things and nitpicks that kind of piled up for me. Most of them piled up around the segment where the Doctor and Belinda get pulled into the film, but yet they were also in a TV. Okay. Again, the logistics don't make sense. I'll try and move on from that. But the whole thing, first of all, it got off on the wrong foot with me immediately because their look is, I was gonna say it's Hanna-Barbera. It's honestly, it's sub Hanna-Barbera. It's even worse than your standard Hanna-Barbera animation. But like, that immediately took me out of the moment because, like, look, Mr. Ring-a-Ding is already a little bit old-fashioned for the time that this is meant to be taking place, but I could buy that, like, a reel with a cartoon like that on it was still in circulation. I could buy that. Hanna-Barbera and organizations like them had that really simplified animation style for television. And Hanna-Barbera didn't exist until 1957. So that style of animation being made for television, not theatrical shorts, not theatrical animation, didn't really even exist yet. And it just looked so cheap. And that whole section with them being animated was so brief, I don't get what the point was. And I also don't really get why, like, being sad and revealing sad aspects of themselves gave them depth. Like, I think what they were going for was that the things that you are afraid to share about yourself, those give you depth, and those just happen to be sad things in these cases. But and I think they try and set it up with a line from Lux earlier where he's like, I'm two-dimensional, don't expect backstory, except the Doctor's giving backstory, Belinda isn't. But also the Doctor giving backstory is kind of contrived anyway, because I remember thinking back in the TARDIS, it was weird that he was reluctant to tell Belinda that he was the last of the Time Lords when he was so freely giving that information to Ruby before. That's not impossible to justify. Belinda might have put him a little bit on the defensive with how she was at the end of the previous episode, but it still stood out to me in a way that seemed odd until we got to this, and I'm like, oh, they were literally just setting up this. It just meant a resolution to the idea. Like, you tell me the Doctor gets turned into a cartoon, I'm going to get excited. You show me that that's the cartoon, I'm going to go, oh. And then it's resolved so quickly, I was kind of like, what was the point of that? Then we get the bit where they think they're back in the theater and Mrs. Lowenstein brings a cop. And my initial gut reaction to that was like, oh, like, I guess it makes sense. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but that is unfortunate because, like, I thought well of her as a character. But then it goes really, really well because the Doctor goes,
your continuity is terrible. This is Miami-Dade County, and that is the uniform of the NYPD. Try harder.
That's a great catch. That's a great way to get out of that scene. I liked that a lot. And then there is the fourth wall break, the full fourth wall break with them climbing out of the TV, and there's 3 Doctor Who fans. There's an overall feel to this that I like, but there's a lot of specifics that bug me. Here's what I want to emphasize more than anything else. What this did really well, speaking as someone who has been at multiple times, not just nerd conventions, Doctor Who conventions in specific. I've been to Gallifrey 1 repeatedly, and I'm going to go again next year. That energy, that unabashed love of this felt really well captured by these performers. I don't know if any of these people are actually Doctor Who fans or if they're just actors. If they're just actors, they capture it wonderfully. If they are fans, then they're fans who turn out to be decent actors. But they do really, really well at capturing that passion, that energy, that joy that I see on con floors all the time. And that was really great. Then there's specifics about it that just gave me pause or felt like a missed opportunity or just felt out of place. So I'm just going to burn through these because, like, they just bugged me. The hashtag RIP Doctor Who. Why is that in there? And especially, why are they connecting that to the idea of, like, where leaks are coming from about, like, what's going to happen? Granted, I'm not really on Twitter anymore, but I would think that anyone who's leaking isn't necessarily part of the hashtag RIP Doctor Who crowd. Because, like, that crowd are people who have been saying for years, like, oh, the show's dead, like, because it's woke, or because it was a woman, or because it's a black person now, or because it's too gay, or because the ratings suck, or whatever. That's not necessarily the people who are dropping leaks. And if there is overlap, I would say that it's probably just the leakers using a hashtag to get as much attention as possible. Again, I'm off Twitter at this point, so maybe there's something I'm missing. But that felt like a weird thing to mention at all, and it didn't make it work by connecting it to like a leak that had happened. And what annoys me about this line even more, I noticed while editing that it's clearly a drop-in line. It was an add-in. It wasn't there originally. You can tell because Robin, who's the character who says it, isn't on screen when it's said, and it's just a generic reaction shot from the other characters.
Hashtag RIP Doctor Who.
This line was clearly not in the original script, but they added it in. Why? One final personal note, and I know I'm spending a lot of time on this moment, but as a fan who watches the show, has stuck with it, always hopes for the best, wants it to succeed, but doesn't have a problem voicing my concerns or criticisms when they come up, having the words hashtag RIP Doctor Who put into the mouth of the one character who isn't uncontrollably squeeing over the entire situation really seems to be painting a picture that if you aren't this level of positive about the show, we're just going to throw you in and mix you in with the people who kind of want the show to die. And speaking purely personally from myself, fuck you. And you know what? Double fuck you for putting in the mouth of a visibly disabled, heavier character. Intended or not, that implication sucks. And while I do actually appreciate the moment at the very end where one of the squeeing fans labels this very episode that we're watching a 7 out of 10, it happens way too far away from the rest of what I'm talking about to really fix it. Too little, too late. It was such a missed opportunity when one of them says, I've seen every episode. Why didn't you have one of the other ones there go, look, I know you love it. You haven't seen every episode. A bunch of the early ones are lost, and you are not old enough to have saw them when they first aired. Like, that would have been a fun nod, and it's the kind of thing that immediately came to my head that most Doctor Who fans who are this level of obsessed that you're showing me would know, and at least one of them would point it out that, like, yeah, no, you haven't seen every episode. Hold on a minute. It just feels like a missed opportunity to go one level deeper and actually get a little bit more into the depth of what it means to be a fan. And also, shout out the classic era a little bit. Speaking of like failing to shout out earlier eras, there's also the moment where it's like, what's your favorite or whatever it is, and they all just say Blink, and they keep saying Blink over and over again. And there's a couple things that bug me about this. First of all, Blink is a beloved episode. Most fans like Blink. I like Blink. It's also not in my top 5, and it's definitely not my number 1. So, like, treating that as like a monolith and an accepted fact, that felt a little reductive. You couldn't even have one of them after they've all said Blink. You couldn't even have one of them go like, well, maybe Heaven Sent, or something like that. Or again, you could have shouted out the classic area. You could have gone, maybe Genesis of the Daleks, which is another really beloved episode that I don't think is as good as everyone says, but it's a beloved episode. Like, you had to say Blink and then keep re-emphasizing it over and over again. And then the other thing that threw me off a little bit about that was the Doctor offering other possibilities. Like, well, what about this? What about this? And they were all things that he specifically had been in.
Not the one with the goblins?
Blink.
I met the Beatles.
Blink.
Not the one where I am standing on a landmine.
Which, first of all, made him seem really egotistical, like rivaling the 10th Doctor levels of ego, which that's saying a lot. And just kind of brought attention to the fact of how few episodes we've gotten, which I don't think is something you really want to be bringing attention to right now. And again, if he'd said like a couple that were ones he didn't, but you couldn't throw one out there that was somebody else's. I don't know. It just made a moment that was, by its nature, a little bit fan wanky feel even more insular than it should have. It should have felt more expansive. It should have felt like getting a glimpse of a much bigger, because Doctor Who's huge, and yet this moment feels weirdly small. I don't know. Again, I do want to stress the energy is real good. The energy from these performers is real good. Although, Murray, like, you really got to flat out recycle an 11th Doctor track for when they're like having their sacrifice moment of being willing to die so that the Doctor can get back into the story. You're really just going to straight up recycle a track. I I know some people were real excited when Murray Gold came back. I wasn't. And stuff like this happens, and I'm really not. But anyways, pettiness. Moving on. I'm not super enthralled at the notion of getting more of these Pantheon characters, because I kind of mentioned the comparison to the Toymaker. Like, I think part of the reason so many of these things, both Maestro and this, feel like retreads of the Toymaker, it's things like the Doctor saying, like, well, you have to answer this because these are the rules you have to obey.
So how do I stop you?
He's not going to tell you that.
He's bound by the rules.
And I remember thinking, why? Because the Toymaker, he's obsessed with games. Games have rules. It makes sense for him to have a bunch of rules in place that he's stuck with, whether he wants them or not, because that's the nature of the thing he represents. Why are things like this applying to a god of music or a god of light? Why should they be obeying the same rules as the god of games? It makes the nature of what Maestro is and what Lux is less core to who they are and more of an aesthetic, because they're stuck obeying certain rules and they're beaten by slightly odd means, just like the Toymaker was. And it just feels like we're taking the Toymaker template and slapping the aesthetic of music and the aesthetic of, well, I was going to say light, but it's like the aesthetic of media and cartoons. And one of the things I would have hoped to get out of this whole Pantheon thing was to really make each of these feel properly unique. And they haven't, because they feel like they're just stamping out the same template with a different aesthetic. Or at least that's kind of how it's feeling to me. And maybe that's an overstatement. Maybe that just is because it struck me as real odd that this one had rules he had to obey, when it's like, okay, like, you couldn't at least have reworded it like this one is more subject to, say, the laws of physics, which govern light, but also physics gets real weird when you start dealing with the speed of light and getting to the real extreme of that. You couldn't have done something with that. It's just, he just has rules the same way the Toymaker had rules. Like, even just shaking it up a little more so it doesn't feel like the same sort of thing. And also, like, that hint, that riddle, whatever it was garbage.
Doctor, just think, what have I not done?
First of all, trash hint, especially considering they've just barely met you. They barely know what you do, much less the thing that you never do. And the thing that you never do is go outside? Also, like, why not? Given that what you want is light and you didn't seem to have a problem being expanded out and effectively dispersing across the universe, why didn't you ever go outside? Again, there's an overall shape and an overall energy that I do like. And like, the performance from Alan Cumming is great. I like the visuals on Lux. And there's a lot of other little things that are good, but then there's all these other little things that are just needling at me and lowering my experience. And I'm sure some people are going to say that I just nitpicked this thing to death. And you know what? That might even be fair, but these things were bugging me as I was watching it. These weren't things that I sat down afterwards to catalog and be like, what can I find to complain about? No, all this, like, I have the notes that I took while I was watching. This stuff all occurred to me in the moment. And that's the experience I had. Like, I cannot speak to anybody's viewing experience other than my own. And if I have a nitpick that's like, well, this bugs me a little, but it doesn't matter, I'll say this bugs me a little, but doesn't matter. And some of these things don't. Actually, a fair number of them don't. Most of them don't. But they kept happening. They just kept going and cropping up across the thing. And it made it land less for me than I was hoping. And something tells me in my gut, it makes it land lower than probably a lot of other people. I think I'm going to get people upset with me. Kind of like how I had people upset with me for not loving The Devil's Chord. I do like it better than The Devil's Chord. I don't know if that's going to win me any favors because I bet it's going to be the same people who really like that one and really love this one. And you're not wrong. You can like it. Disagreeing with me is not a crime. But yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, if the pattern for the overall season holds for this season the way that it did for last season, then we are in for a 3-episode run of absolute bangers. And I'm here for that at the very least. Oh yeah, Mrs. Flood showed up at the end. I don't care. Oh, you know what? That was the other thing. The whole fourth wall break and the whole meta thing with the doctor and these fans, I think that would have hit so much harder if Mrs. Flood wasn't around. And I'm not necessarily saying remove from the story completely. We're kind of stuck with her until she gets explained. But like, I don't think we needed a reminder of her last episode. Or this episode. I don't think we did. No, actually, I know we didn't. Because she doesn't do anything. She's never done anything. She is just pointless fluff until we find out who the heck she is. And even after we do, I bet you most of her appearances we didn't need anyways. But I think having a character that we've seen repeatedly already breaking the fourth wall kind of took the wind out of that moment with the fans and the whole meta thing and climbing out of the TV. Like, it was still kind of cool, you know, my nitpicks aside, but I think that would have been a much bigger moment if we weren't already having a fourth wall breaking character just hanging around doing nothing but being there all the dang time. That one isn't strictly speaking this episode's fault, but it is RTD's fault. Dude, like, you've not given me a reason to care about Mrs. Flood other than just, ooh, don't you want to know who she is? No. At this point, no. I don't care. You'll tell me eventually, and maybe when you tell me, maybe it won't make all these early appearances work. It won't. But maybe you'll actually get a good story out of whatever the reveal is. Maybe that'll happen. I'll cross my fingers. But for right now, I think that's about everything. Oh no, wait, 2 more things. The end credits with the 3 fans kind of talking over it, and then we get a little bit with them. That was cute. That was a nice way to kind of acknowledge, no, they continue on. I like that. And like just the notion of them talking over the credits. That was fun. But then, single best moment of the episode. And like, for all the complaints that I kind of have about the structure and the way that the Pantheon villains are being handled and have been handled up to this point, I will take nothing away from the moment when we find out why you shouldn't make him laugh. Because Mr. Ring-a-Ding's been saying, don't make me laugh. And then when they do, it's the giggle. It's the same giggle from the episode The Giggle. And using that sound, hearing that, I was like, oh, damn. Like, even as someone who didn't super love Maestro and wasn't necessarily anticipating or excited for more Pantheon villains, dropping that sound right there, oh, that was good. That was so good. That was gold. That, like, I could feel my heart jump in, like, in a good way of like, oh, ha! So, all the props to that for the reveal. And I don't know if they'll be able to pull it off that smoothly again. Because like, it seemed like the existing cartoon character had "don't make me laugh" like as a catchphrase. But I mean, existing character within the universe of this show. Obviously the character was created for this, but you get what I mean. But like, I that sound I really like as a signifier that, oh, we're in trouble. I like it a lot. That was good. I'm glad I could end it on a more positive note. In any case, what are your thoughts about Lux? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living, even if you can't help me out that way. Like, share, subscribe, the YouTube stuff. You know what it is. It all helps me out. Don't worry too much about it, though. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council, and I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Goddess Elida, Zubin Lotfulla, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Movie Turtle, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Andre, Becky Sparks, Claire Wright, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Toku Bluhuvian, Adam RDL Taylor, Pal Barabajago, Mary Mello, Mira G, Sir Didymus is my favorite. I've never screwed that one up before. Well, if you want to hear me mess up your name, check out the rewards on the Patreon. I'm going to blame you.